it. We have a lot to cover tonight. Welcome, everyone, to the second fellowship workshop for A Blade of Grass. My name is Deborah Fisher. I'm the executive director. And we are honored to have with us tonight Mierle Laderman Ukeles, an artist that I've been wanting to meet for a million trillion years. So I'm going to blush a little bit as I read her bio. Just a little bit tonight about the format of tonight's evening. This is a great opportunity for artists to get to know what our fellowship program is all about, get to know whether or not your project fits with our fellowship program, ask questions of an artist who's been working directly with communities and in the public realm, and get to know our staff, right? So before we get started, we got a lot of staff downstairs still, making sure that everybody gets in. So this is how things are going to go. I'm going to introduce Mierle. Mierle's going to talk about her work for a short period of time, introduce a couple of older projects and a new project, right? And then there's going to be a question and answer session that's just about her process, right? Mierle's work is an excellent example of the kind of work that A Blade of Grass is funding with its fellowship program. That's why she's here tonight. Then I'm going to talk for a very short period of time about the fellowship itself, right? What we fund, what we don't fund, what we're looking for, what our selection criteria are, etc. Right? And then we're going to have more question and answer that's just about, welcome everyone. And then we're going to have more question and answer that's just about the fellowship program, or anything you want to ask Mierle, anything you want, right? And then after that, we're going to stick around and you can ask questions. You're going to meet all of the A Blade of Grass staff who's here, and you can all answer your questions about your specific projects. Okay? So without further ado, Mierle Laderman Ukeles was born in 1939 in Denver, Colorado, and she's madly in love with the public domain and public culture. And as a result, nearly all of her work takes place in the public sphere. In 1969, she wrote the Manifesto for Maintenance Art, 1969, that is still exhibited and taught today. Since 1977, when she became the official, unsalaried artist-in-residence of the New York City Department of Sanitation, a position she still holds, Ukeles has created art that deals with the endless maintenance and service work that keeps the city alive: urban waste flows, recycling, ecology, urban sustainability, and our power to transform degraded land and water into healthy public places. Since the 1980s, much of Ukeles' work has been created through infrastructure Interface Inc., her conceptual organization, it says right here, that's focused on transforming closed landfills into urban parks, with a Percent for Art commission for Fresh Kills in Staten Island in New York since 1989, one of the largest municipal landfills in the world, at Dehaney Park in Cambridge since 1980, and at evapotranspiration for Triennial, an installation at the Tel Aviv Museum proposed for Israel's largest landfill. Ukeles asks whether we can design modes of survival for a thriving planet rather than an entropic one that doesn't crush our personal and civic freedom and silence the individual's voice. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Mierle.
Chairs here.
Oh, no, we need those, sorry.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
okay,
you're going to sit in one.
Can you all hear me in the back?
Yes.
You can hear me okay? And if you don't, tell me. I really want you to hear me, okay? All right. Blade of Grass is trying to get a lot accomplished tonight, so I will try to move through some work about the work itself as quickly as I can, and then I'd like you to feel free to ask me any questions you would like about my process or how this happened, so that it can be so you can use it. That's the purpose of tonight, so that you can use what I'm showing you for your own purposes. And then I think that the Blade of Grass people will take over and talk about their stuff. Okay? Here's a story. This is called Unburning Freedom Hall. Here's a story that became stuck in my heart since I first heard it over 20 years ago. In the 1830s in Philadelphia, 3 different groups, women, abolitionists, and African Americans, who were unable to even rent places to meet on their own. Even though Philadelphia was the home of the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, and all the U.S. freedom rhetoric, they formed a coalition in which they found strength and a unified vision of freedom that included those different from themselves. Together they dreamed of a grand meeting place built of the finest materials on the level with Independence Hall nearby. 2,000 people contributed $20 each. They built it, calling it Pennsylvania Hall, although that most people called it Freedom Hall. A series of grand empty spaces. That's all that this building was. Built for different size gatherings. Its sole purpose was to be, quote, a temple of free speech. It opened on November 14, 1838, with different meetings and conferences of each of the 3 members of this coalition. A mob gathered from the first moment the hall opened. People started throwing stones, shattering these windows, and threatening those who were trying to enter. The people went to Mayor Swift and said, Mayor Swift, you've got to help us. This is a brand new building, and the mob isn't going away. He said, I'll help you. He came to the entrance of Freedom Hall. He said to the people who built it, give me the key. Let's close down tonight, and let's calm everything. They trusted him. They gave him the key. They canceled all their meetings. They locked the door. And then Mayor Swift, they handed him the key. And then he turned to the mob and he said, you will be my police. On the night of November 17th, after he said that, in 1938, the mob burned Freedom Hall to the ground. For 4 days, this original American dream came true. But discouraged, they never rebuilt it. Oops. Fire destroys and hatred burns. In 1992, depending on your politics, the riots or the uprising in Los Angeles became the worst civil disturbance in the history of the United States. Not just some fires in a neighborhood. This threatened to spread all over Los Angeles. I want to tell you about an artwork I made in response to this. This artwork is my reinvention of the dream that came true in the United States in 1838. I was invited by Tom Finkelpearl and Julie Lazar to create a work for the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art, L.A. MoCA. I proposed to deal with Los Angeles' history of fires from racial hatred, not focusing on Los Angeles, but based on a lateral story from Philadelphia, because it's not just LA, it's an old US problem everywhere. I proposed to unburn Freedom Hall. I needed to build my own coalition to begin to unburn Freedom Hall. The coalition I built were those who keep the city, the people who make a city possible. Without them, no city. Who are they? Street maintenance workers, sanitation workers, firefighters, and kids who could project this old story into the future. The materials I chose were a great deal of social negotiations and social cooperation, and glass vessels, transparent yet strong, and they can hold things. The work had two kinds of public components, outside and inside. My journeys began outside, starting in South Central Los Angeles, which was the epicenter of the events of 1992, then expanding outward all over Los Angeles to 27 journeys. First, I repeated the story of unburning Freedom Hall hundreds of times. I invited people to make unburnings, which I never defined. I never defined what constituted an unburning. That was for the individual creator to decide. And I promised to incorporate each unburning in a huge artwork I would make at LA MoCA. We brought them, we, meaning me, the curators, and the education staff of the museum. We brought them clear glass vessels, simple ones, mayo jars, pickle, olive jars, baby food jars, and supplies. A sanitation worker holding up the jar says, "I know what you want," even though I never said what I want. This is me pointing to the transparent bottle. You could see my spirit in here. I can put my spirit in here. I love telling you the following. I negotiated 690 city work hours. The critical point was that the art had to be in real work time and in real workplace space, and that I had to make several visits to each facility, no instant creation demanded. I made art with 301 city workers. We set up studios in the work yards next to the trucks and the fire engines. Often we started, in other words, the hour that they would give me on various times that I came would often be at 6 a.m., the first work hour before they hit the streets. This is a street maintenance yard. We set up a whole studio right next to the trucks. This was a great thing, a great accomplishment. I worked in many city high schools. I got 961 hours of learning time set aside for this work. At each stop, I retold the story. Here you see people. I got the fire department. This is a high school in South Central Los Angeles, which almost burnt to the ground. And I got the fire department to give me permission to start this fire in the courtyard of the school, because I wanted to show that fire can also wipe away something that you don't want. So these are people putting bad things that they hate into the fire. I think in a few old boyfriends. They'll never do it, all the bosses said to me. Well, during these journeys, people made 720 unburnings. Here are some unburnings. A little bed with the pink stuffed satin quilt, the bottle becoming a landscape. The sign at the base of the bottle said, People dream in a bed, but less fortunate people don't have a bed. So I am offering this bed. This way, everyone in the world will dream in a bed, not a poem. And it was signed Marvin Garcia, a high school student in South Central Los Angeles. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. The firefighter, Leroy McKnight, died in the line of duty. He was so powerful that they called him EQ. You see his initials there. EQ stands for earthquake. His brother, also a firefighter, still couldn't talk about his brother's death. He brought in this unburning, put it on the kitchen counter in the firehouse, and walked out without saying a word. It held EQ's glove, his funeral memorial card, and sheltered deep inside, without saying this to me, EQ's Bible. EQ's brother believed that the artwork and the art place, the museum, was a good enough place to honor his brother without explanation. What power he conferred on art. This is from a guy on the threshold. I love these people who stay on the edge. He never came into the space during my several visits to this sanitation section. We were finishing up, packing up the unburnings. This guy still standing in the doorway. At the last minute, he walked across and plunked this down. His boss said to him, "Put some color on it. It is so ugly." "Nope, it's my art." And he walked out. So those were the journeys around, outside, in the streets, in these public facilities, all over Los Angeles. Inside, in the museum, what is the material? Shattered glass, crushed glass, formerly mayo jars, pickle jars, olive jars, the same material as the clear hole vessels of the unburnings. How much? 560 tons. That's 1 million pounds of crushed glass. 560 tons inside the museum, delivered in 28 trailer trucks, choreographed so that when the dump truck lifted it up, I was terrified that they were going to hit the beams up there, and they just like came an inch or two below. And the man from the recycling yard who choreographed the dumping of most of the glass it was just beautiful work. 560 tons delivered by 28 trailer trucks. I set up a recycling yard right inside the museum. And for those of you who make heavy work, I have to tell you that LA Mocha, the old building, the Geffen Contemporary, you can put anything in there because it has a great floor load. That's what I always ask when anyone invites me somewhere, what's your floor load? And then they start getting very nervous. The bulldozer operator and I, we worked as one. In the center, in the empty center of the glass landscape surround that I have built, at what I call the hearth, I float a glass halo of cobalt blue stained glass suspended from 36 feet above and tethered to the ground. Here is the Peace Builders table, a place for making, telling, talking, meeting, facing each other. This is the entrance to the installation in the museum, a video retelling the story of Freedom Hall. These are firefighters I worked with to make unburnings in South Central, and they are now visitors to the exhibition, checking up on what I did with their unburnings. Their big ladder truck parked in front of the museum outside. In the museum, ringed by gatherings in of hundreds of prior free choices of unburnings from outside, ensconced within the glistening stillness of the mounds in their paused state, the visitors became a culturally active decision maker, and the museum became, well, that's what I hoped, an active site of transformation. 1,000 more unburnings were made in the museum. There was another use of the table. Oops. This was a setting for 8 different formal peace talks at the Hearth, each led by great local peace builders that we searched out with the staff of the museum, sent out letters to many, many communities. Who are the great peace builders in your community? From all over Los Angeles. 8 different ways to conceive of peace building: conflict resolution, inner peace, peace and the land, environmental neighbors, home and family, coalitions among religions, city work as peace building. I actually asked to have a peace talk every day during the months of the exhibition. And you know, you push, and then they who invite you in the first place, they hit a point and they say, Ukeles, I think you should go back to New York for a while. We could only afford 8 peace talks. It was okay. No, it should have been every day, but. Oops, sorry. This is another peace talk, the Pan-Asian African American Coalition, a coalition created in the midst of the riots, in the midst of the uprising by one person named Marcia Chu, a tiny young woman who told me she simply couldn't stand what was happening. She lost 15 pounds during the 2 weeks of the uproar. She led this peace talk. Her sister, on the other side of the table, burst out crying. Marcia, I could never tell you how much I admired what you did. Only here is art, she could. Marcia said, showing her own unburning, for 5 years I'm carrying a knot in my stomach. Now I can let it go. Change can be created right here before your eyes. I wanted to raise up the question, these shattered walls, are we going to build these walls back up, or will we keep burning the city down? Choose, decide. You can unburn it. This is an overview of the unburning landscape. At the end of the exhibition, 28 trailer trucks loaded the tons of crushed glass, left the museum, and delivered them directly into the fire. Fire became a source, not of destruction, but of recreation. And the crushed, splintered shards of glass returned as pickle jars, mayo, baby food, once again. 5 minutes? Okay, I'm doing pretty good. Okay. These are some pictures from the Snow Workers Ballet in the Echigo-Tsumari Triennial in Tokomachi City, Japan, in 2003. Echigo-Tsumari, I learned when they invited me to come take a look and think about what I might want to do, has 12 to 14 feet of snow every year. That means that the little farm villages, because of the snow, the best rice in Japan grows in this region. But when it snows, the first floor of the town is drowned in the snow. So I said, I want to work with the snow drivers, the people who dig out people from the snow and make it possible for them to live there. So I asked to meet them. They invited me. We all take off our shoes. We go in the garage. We go upstairs and sit on mats, and there's a big pot of tea cooking. And I think to myself, if sanitation workers in New York saw me, they would drop dead. They don't take off their shoes in the garage. So I said to these people, I bet in the winter, everybody loves you. No, not one soul spoke English, so I had to work through translator. I bet in the winter, everybody loves you, right? Everybody agreed. And then I said, I bet in the summer, everybody forgets all about you. Is that true? Yes, everybody nodded vigorously. So I said, next summer, let's remind them. They asked me to send them a plan in advance, and I said, nothing doing. I never worked that way. I will create the ballet for as many days as you give me, which was 3. I will create the ballet together with the workers because they know much more about their vehicles than I do. We'll work it out. This is a very scary way of working, I have to tell you, because I stick to it, and it's really the best way to do this because then the work, the art, rises up between me and the workers. It takes a while for them to actually, I say to them, I'm not your boss. And people who do service work are used to having a boss that tells them what to do. That's the deal. And then we go into a kind of vacuum because they don't believe me. Because here I am, I didn't get there just wandering off the street. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened for me to be standing in their garage talking to them. And it goes into this silence, which is one of the scariest things that ever happens to me. And in the silence, I even say, I'd like to know what you ever thought about doing when nobody was watching you. Because they have huge power in their hands, driving these very powerful machines. I said, I'm interested in, what you think about, like your imagination. And little by little, I've done 7 work ballets, and I'm actually writing a book about it right now, that if you keep your mouth shut long enough, the ideas start coming out. They understand that you mean it, that you're not the boss, that this is something different. It's something different that they own as much as you do. This is the score that everyone had a full set of the choreography. And one of the movements was the tragic love story of Romeo and Juliet. Here's the entrance of the 13 vehicles. You can see the audience on the bridge overhead and also down on the field. Aren't these already a ballet? Just looking at them. These are like rotaries. They cut these two choppers on the side, cut through this walls of snow, and then it sucks the snow in, and there's a blower, and it blows these big fountains of snow. I just flipped when I saw them. I thought, that's it. This is a segment from Romeo and Juliet. I was feeling desperate that the moves that we had cooked up, they were great. They were like make you catch your breath because they're such great drivers that they bring their wheels right, almost touching each other. But I felt like they needed something else, so we cooked up this Romeo and Juliet thing. This chorus of tire dozers, even though they are the biggest and strongest of all the trucks, are narcissistic goof-offs. They are supposed to protect the young lovers. They are full of overweening pride. The young lovers approaching each other tenderly. They are thrilled with each other, even though their families hate each other. They proclaim their love unafraid. They kiss. This is actually a very dangerous move, because if it's not done exquisitely, they will flip each other over. Ecstasy before doom. I hear a lady behind me sighing, oh, oh, and the Triennial's photographer on site, who's very jaded, you know, a guy who's been around forever, I heard him say, oh, this is so emotional. The dozer chorus is so busy playing to the audience, swaying their blades this way and that they utterly do not notice the lurking evil motor grader who darts out behind their backs and utterly destroys the couple. I don't have a picture of the motor grader, I'm sorry. This is the finale. There were 4 movements of the ballet of all 13 trucks along the river. In 2011, I got an email from the Triennial saying 8 years ago you did the snow ballet and we liked it so much we would like you to come back and do another one. And a few weeks after that was the tsunami, earthquakes, and Fukushima nuclear disaster. And I was sure that they would have to cancel the Triennial. And they wrote and they said, you know, people are sad all over Japan. We have to do something that's good. And they went ahead and pulled off, even though they had an earthquake in their region, which is on the other side of the mountains from Fukushima, but they had suffered great damage from earthquakes, and they went ahead. These are 3 drivers that I worked with in 2008. That they're just really out of this world. This is again Romeo and Juliet. This time they agreed to paint the blades. That's purple for Romeo and peach for Juliet. And at the end, I said I wanted to invite people in the audience to come to meet the drivers. And someone said to me, Japanese people, you know, whenever anybody ever says anything like that to you, you gotta, you know, step back. Japanese people are very shy, and no one will do this. And I didn't pay any attention to them, and I walked up and down the rope that, you know, kept the people from getting run over by the trucks during the ballet. And I just said in English, which they couldn't understand, come, come, like that. And this is what you see. Many women got into the trucks because there are no women drivers yet, and practiced for the future. And just to finish up, I just want to show you a few images of, this is Fresh Kills in the old days, the biggest municipal landfill in the world that operated for 50 years and was closed in 2001. This is an aerial of the 2,200 acres of Fresh Kills. It's about 3 Central Parks big. And I got, in 1989, I got a commission to do a percent for art work there. I've done many projects, including a 6-channel video work and other works, but now I'm working on a permanent work for the South Park, which is over here. Here you see the red arrow points to my site. I don't really have time to get into it, but this, you see all the layers of the environmental closure. The black is plastic, it's like a condom that gets put over the garbage to contain it, and takes several years. This is one of the big mounds, it's 1 mile long. this is my site here. This area here. That's Highway 440 in the background, and way in the background you see what's called the West Mound, where the debris from the World Trade Center are buried. Here's another view of my site. It really is just beautiful. I'm interested in this land bridge that connects two mounds. It's not doing it. I'm interested in low tide. Every day this drama, this ecological theater occurs of low tide, high tide, the moon. It's the moon on us, picking up the water, plunking it down like that. I want to make a place where people can understand what's going on there. There'll be a three-part overlook that brings you out over all this bushy growth, where you're floating over in this wonderful space, and two earthworks, one where you're standing on the land and one where you actually can be sheltered within the land. It becomes its own kind of place that you're within. These are early models that we're working on now. Here, whatever, it's sort of hard to understand. I hope that it started in 1989, and I just signed my 4th contract extension that goes to 2016.
Wow. Yeah.
No extra money. Before you clap, no extra money. Thank you very much.
Mierle, thank you so much. Mierle, go ahead and take this mic and have a seat. And we're going to open up the, I'm sure there are tons of questions, right? Yeah? It's kind of a name here. Shoot.
Hi.
All right, okay.
I was just curious, like, in what context you approached the group in Japan? Like, were you just like crazy American woman who shows up and wants to do a dance with them, or like, were you like, I'm from this organization and this is, you know, this is my idea?
I'm sorry that I didn't make that clear. I was selected by the American curator, Tom Finkel. Is it
Yeah, it's on.
It's on.
It sounds like it's on. Can people
Can
hear
you
it?
hear it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There were several curators, because it's an international triennial, and there's an Asian curator and an American and a European curator, and Tom Finkelpearl is the American curator, and he invited me. That's what brought me there.
Questions?
I was wondering how many sort of community engagement projects you'd done before the MoCA project. Like 20 years worth of projects, or was it like?
Ever since I wrote the Manifesto in 1969, I've made art with others, with maintenance workers, almost city workers, almost exclusively. And I've made a lot of work. I can't tell you.
Questions at the back? Let's go to question.
The point, I want to make a point. The point is that there's a thread, like a continuing thread, that where I got fascinated by the fact that maintenance had no language and no culture, and the people that did the work became sort of invisibilized. And actually when I had a baby in 1968, I went from people being interested in me as an artist, oh, what do you do? I don't understand that, that's so weird, tell me about it, to people saying, do you do anything? And I got so ticked off that, you know, it opened up a whole world. I looked around, I think I floated out of the entitled class that I was in from my very fancy education. As a mother maintenance worker, I entered a different class, I did. And I opened up my eyes and I saw that most of the people in the world were with me there. And this was actually a door that opened up for me where I could feel connected to people all over the world who have to keep going, need to survive. And many, many are doing repetitive service work and have to deal with how boring it is and how necessary it is and how weird all of that stew becomes. So of all the different groups that I work with, there's that sort of thread that floats through.
Sure.
My question is about time, using the projects in Japan as an example. I'm not sure if it was just a perspective of the photographs, but from 03 to 08, you see this much larger crowd. And
Yes.
I'm assuming like they knew you the second time around, they kind of knew what to expect, and so you're able to attract a larger audience. So I'm just curious if you could talk about the necessity to have time and the building of relationships and doing this type of work.
It's a great question. I really wasn't myself, because I was invited in both instances. It wasn't that I lived there, like a lot of other projects, certainly that I have done with Sanitation in New York, where I'm here. I've been there for years and years and years, so I can work on stuff like that. There, I'm invited. However, the organizers of the Triennial said to me, first of all, the weather in 2003, the day of the ballet, not any minute of the rehearsals, which were perfection, gorgeous. The day of the ballet, it was raining. And I went to the boss of the sanitation, of the drivers, and I said, should we cancel it and change the time? He said, cancel the work. So we went ahead in the rain. I think that cut the audience. And when they invited me 8 years later, there had already been 3 other triennials in between. I was shocked that they invited me again. But they also said, we insist on having 3 performances across 3 months so that the audience can develop. And they keep a lot of records. And actually the audience grew every single performance. So what you said is actually very important. And I must tell you that this Romeo and Juliet thing has developed its own life in the region, as strange as that sounds. The first driver who was Romeo, they still call him Romeo to this day, 8 years later. And it's something that's been taken in that town, in that region. They're fabulous. They were really the last 2 Romeo and Juliets. I was worried that they wouldn't be as good as the ones in 2003, and because they were a little shy. And at first, I realized, look, they've got it taken. And over these days of the rehearsal, they took it so that by the performance, they were phenomenal. They even were able, these 2, in 2012, were able to make the whole truck vibrate. The whole truck vibrate, besides their touching their blades, seeking out each other with their blade, so that the audience went insane. It was great.
That's great.
I showed you the Snow Workers Ballet because it's short. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, I worked on it like over a 1-year research trip, came back. It's very expensive to take 13 people off the job and pay them, and the vehicles and all that. So they give me very little time. I always ask for much more time, and they never give it to me. Like 3 days is about, so it's scary. But I wanted to show you something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is so nice.
Yeah, great. Next question.
Hi, Thanks so much for sharing everything with us and sharing your experiences with us. I was wondering if you could share.
Could you stand up? I can't see you.
Stand.
Okay.
It's a big room.
Okay.
I was wondering if you could share, kind of piggybacking on that other question, if you could share with us some of your ways of entering community, especially when you have such a short time. Like, how do you enter community?
Great question.
I think it's one of the most important questions of all, because who are we? Who are we coming in? And it can be really manipulated and kind of abused also. In my case, because I focus on work and because I focus on service work and a kind of maintenance work often connected to cities, so I've accumulated a lot of knowledge. And then that's one thing. The knowledge gets me way down the road. I also I always do a huge amount of research, always. And so you know where you are. Who are you talking to? What is this place, like that? That's really, really important. Another thing is to listen. I think that might be the biggest skill of any artist who wants to do things with other people, is to be able to listen. And that's one of the biggest gifts that you could give yourself. Because in my experience, and I've dealt with many, many, many thousands of people in my work, if you listen, you hear things that you never, ever could make up or imagine. If the person feels that you are really listening to them, that often will, I call it the gates of acceptance, that you can actually see it happen in somebody's eyes, where they'll say to themselves, what the hell? I'll work with this person. Not everybody will ever do that, but if they feel that you're listening to them and that you make a space for them. I have another thing, that there has to be a zone of freedom and free choice, or I believe it's not art. That they have another human being has the right to come into your work, or to be part of your work, or to decide to shape this work with you, but they have that free choice, and they have to maintain that freedom of choice throughout the whole entire project, or I don't think it's art. Bottom line.
Great. We have time for 2 more questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask, because of all the examples you've shown and that involve working with communities, they seem to be on very large scales. Either it involves a lot of people, or it involves very big things, giant things. Is it important when you work with communities, is that bigness important? And what role does the bigness of things play for you?
When I decided to do the performance work Touch Sanitation with all 8,500 sanitation workers at that point, my husband said to me, this is going to kill you. Sample. That's what you do. You do a sample, it's like an abstraction. And I said, nothing doing, I used to be an abstract artist, it's not abstract. It has to be all. The whole city, the whole system. I was a maniac. Everywhere. I went to every single facility, and I tried to face every single person, because the work was about the system, the city, the maintenance, like that. However, I have to tell you, in the last you get yourself into a bit of trouble that way, or kind of, but I want to also prove that I could do it, you know, that that a person could do this and deal with an entire city, an entire system, and be okay. And I was okay. I wanted to prove that, and I did prove that. In the last year, I did 2 performance works, one with 2 people at the Queen's Museum, and one with, you know, like 6 sanitation workers and about 5 other people. That was intimate, and I loved it.
Great. Last question.
I was wondering, regarding the Unburns, how did you maintain the link between the artists that created each of them and the object themselves? Like, how did you did they sign it, or was there any connection that remained between the one that produced the work and the work, each piece work itself?
You're talking about ownership, right?
Not necessarily. Yes, I mean more connection, because these people gave. You were saying that they were the artists.
They gave, and they gave
Yes.
it. They gave it up.
So yeah.
You're right. I don't know. I said maybe it's a problem. It might be it's something you have to think about. I think people signed their unburning. A lot of them were little small. They signed them. They handed them over. They were certainly invited, and we went to a lot of trouble to make, you know, try to have gatherings for people to come see their work. But they gave them up. Then the issue is, what the hell do I do with them at the end of the? So I have a lot of them in storage.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's problematic, and it's something that should be talked about.
Interesting. Well, Meryl, thank you very much for presenting. Thank you. And thanks for the great questions. Back to the presentation. I want to start by thanking. Meryl for really. Sorry, I'm going to adjust this mic. I want to start by thanking Meryl for presenting really great examples of the kind of work that we're looking for, and also for being really clear about the problems of working in this kind of work and how difficult it is to work with communities, right? And how interesting it is. It's very. That's what we're focusing on, right? So I'm going to spend a little time now talking about these socially engaged art fellowship workshop, right? This is where we are. We're giving out. I want to start by kind of going over our mission, right? A Blade of Grass nurtures socially engaged art. We provide resources to artists who demonstrate artistic excellence and serve as innovative conduits for social change. And we evaluate the quality of work in this evolving field by fostering an inclusive, practical discourse about the aesthetics, function, ethics, and meaning of socially engaged art that resonates both within and outside the contemporary dialogue. So what we're really doing is focusing on making these fellowships that help artists who are working in communities and that also illuminate this practice to a wider audience. This is a great example of what we fund. Housing is a Human Right was one of our very first grantees, an Arts Files grantee from last year. Is everybody familiar with their work? No? Yeah? Some yes, some no? Okay, so Housing is a Human Right is a 2-person team, Michael Primo and Rachel Falcone, and they are, did I hear a shout out? Yeah? And they are focused on telling stories about home and the dignity that comes from having a home. And then they plug this storytelling work into larger social work initiatives in lots of interesting ways. This is an eviction defense rally in Bed-Stuy. Let's zoom out a little bit. what we're funding is socially engaged projects that promote art as a catalyst for social change, right? Projects in which co-creation with non-artists is a part of the process. Projects that feature artists in leadership roles. Dialogue-based projects that emphasize active and sustainable partnerships with communities, right? We value process over product, relationship building and problem solving are key goals. We're not going to shy away from your project because it's complicated or it poses problems, right? We're interested in how those problems work. We're interested in actually actively engaging those problems. And we're very interested in projects in which artists engage community members as equal partners on locally relevant issues or globally relevant issues as they apply to a very local context, right? We want to make sure it's clear that we provide funding with minimal restriction. Budget line items may include things like living expenses that are not direct project expenses. One of the things that artists...
Everybody does that.
No, it's critical. Yeah, artists need to get paid. Let's talk a little bit about what we don't fund. We don't fund projects in which the focus is producing objects for display. We don't fund an exhibition. We don't fund a residency or studio practice, except as they directly relate to achieving the outcomes of a community-based project. And we don't fund projects that lack a co-created outcome or community engagement. So if you apply saying like, I'm going to go do a project in a community and I know exactly what the project is, we're not going to fund your project, okay? Eligible applicants, with a little more information. Eligible applicants are individual artists or artist collectives. If you're a collective, submit a single application. This is very important, don't get disqualified. If you if every person in your collective applies with the same project, we totally will understand that you did that. You cannot be currently enrolled as a student. You have to be a legal resident or a U.S. citizen, okay? You have to be at least 25 years of age. You have not received a grant from us in the past 3 years. You have to have a project that engages directly with a specific community or communities. No general talking about people. You have to have some people in mind that you're going to work with. And you have to have a website with contextualized examples of past work that a selection panel can review. We don't take JPEGs, right? We look at your website. That's an important part of applying. Fellowship participation, right? This is an active fellowship relationship. It lasts a year, and it's a two-way street. And it's good for both of us, right? So it's a year-long active funding relationship. So fellows, we're going to choose 7 fellows in this go-around, and they form an active cohort that relates to one another, right? And that relates to us, and we provide services in addition to funding, okay? So you will go through, if you become a fellow, you'll go through a 2-day orientation that explores our documentation and assessment models and includes workshops on strategies for community engagement. We're going to do quarterly co-assessment meetings. So one of the things that you're going to be doing if you're a fellow is assessing yourself on a regular basis, right? And assessing the work that you're doing. You're also going to be assessing your peers and seeing how they're doing among one another. Support and feedback for ongoing self-assessment in the form of collaborative action research, again with the assessment. And your project also gets assessed by an external evaluator. One of the things that we think is very interesting is that artists, when they're working in communities, have to be solely responsible for the stories that come out of the community. That's not necessarily the most credible position to put an artist in. We want to help on that front and really go and find out what happened and tell your story, help you tell your story. We do produce a short video documentary on each project from an external perspective. This is not intended to be the only documentation of your project, but it does help, right? You have access to us, access to our conference room for meetings, and we also provide access to a broad network of specialists outside the art world, okay? One of the interesting things about these projects is that they are committed to real goals that are external to the art world. So your project may need a lawyer. Your project may need access to politicians. Your project may, and your project may need consulting in terms of stakeholder management. You may be missing a stakeholder group. You may need work kind of understanding your budget. We're here to help with those things. Here's the timeline and deadline, okay? The fellowship application process is two-step, right? We don't want everybody to fill out, to spend many, many days. I've done this myself. I was an artist until fairly recently, so I don't know how many times I've like spent days and days applying for something that 900 other people applied to, right? So what we do is we break it up into a two-step process that starts with a letter of interest. It's a 500-word letter and eligibility information and your website, right? So it's designed to be easy to apply to. The deadline for that submission process is December 2nd. We'll be going through all of those letters, and we'll be making notification to people who are finalists, right? People who are semifinalists will be asked to submit a full application. That includes a budget, a timeline, lots and lots of concrete information about exactly what you intend to do. The deadline for the full application is January 31st, right? We will be interviewing finalists before they're fully accepted, right? Because it's an active year-long relationship. And we'll be notifying grantees March 31st. We expect the orientation to be April 25th and 26th. So we'll be busy this spring. We want to make sure that you know at the very beginning what exactly our process is for deciding and our selection criteria. We find that artists often don't get told how this works, which is lame. The first selection committee will be a panel of readers. Each panel is made up of a curator or an art administrator, an educator, an artist, a scholar, and a representative from a blade of grass, usually me. What we're going to do is we're going to review all of the letters of interest, and we're going to recommend up to 50 finalists to go to the next level. Finalists will submit the full application. This application will be screened by a separate selection committee that is made up of the same types of people, right? So it's a different artist, a different educator, a different museum administrator, curator, etc., right? A blade of grass staff winds up screening final recommendations that are made by that selection committee, and then those final selections are then ratified by our board of directors. Here's how to apply. Don't worry, it's not like this. It's a very simple process. Our deadline for applications is December 2nd, 2013. We only accept applications via online form, okay? You can apply through our website. Any application that is received via any other means is not going to be accepted or acknowledged. It has to be through the online form. All applicants need to submit 4 things. Simple. An eligibility screening, that's answering some questions about whether or not you're a US citizen, how old you are, etc. A 500-word letter of interest that talks about your project. A link to a website with examples of past projects. You have to have a website in order to apply. And you have to have a CV in PDF format that talks about what you've done in the past. Let's go into letters of interest just a little bit. We fund artists who take a leadership role and engage directly with communities to develop projects that are of ambitious scale and that actively promote social change. So you need to position your project in those terms, right? We definitely do not fund projects that are focused on exhibition outcomes, artist residencies, or studio practice, right? Unless they're specifically geared towards social engagement. So if you're thinking that you have something that's very socially minded, but it has this part, right? Look at the point above and make sure that your letter addresses these notions of social change and actively engaging communities. Carefully consider the guidelines and really address them, okay? And make sure that you keep your statement to 400 words or less, because the online form only accepts 500 words. So here are the guidelines. This is all also on our website. What's your project's goals, and to describe activities, right? So these are the kinds of questions that we're hoping that you answer during your letter of interest, okay? What are the goals of the project? Knowing what the goals are and clearly articulating them is really, really helpful, right? Knowing what kind of change you're expecting to enact, and that doesn't necessarily have to be like end global warming or solve lead poisoning forever for everyone, but it does. You do have to have a point of view, right? Will the project be realized in the course of the year? That is okay if it's not. I want to make sure that that's very clear. A lot of this work is ongoing, but we need to be clear about what our entry point and end point is for the project. We need to understand exactly how your project is engaging with the community, right? This is a big part of what we're funding, is this community engagement piece. So you need to be able to very clearly articulate how you're engaging with people, who you know, who your liaisons are, how you're considering this work, okay? You need to be able to describe the ways in which community members may be directly involved in executing the project's goals. And you need to describe the community that you're working with and the relationships that you've already established. Critical, okay? So for now, I want to open it up to questions about everything.
Hi, I'm John Halpern.
Hey.
I have a question about your concept about community.
Yeah.
And when you when you refer to this community, it sounds as though the community is separate from a larger scale society.
Sure, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So no, are you saying that criteria is based on a very focused community, or can it be?
We want you to, the word community is really problematic, right? For a lot of different reasons, it's a little overused and it's a little vague. For us, what we're thinking about is the idea that the artist is working with a specific group of people. That group of people can be really pretty vast. It can be everybody in the sanitation department, for example, right? But that's a specific group of people that it has a boundary around that you defined, right, for specific reasons. That's what I mean. And that group of people can vary in size.
So in other words, demographic could be what?
No, demographic is a different thing. Like a marketer has a demographic, right? We're talking about people that you have a relationship with as an artist. We want to see that relationship. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Munir's got the mic.
To follow up on that community question, can it be, does it necessarily have to be a community that's outside of the art community, or can it be a subpopulation within the art community that this project addresses?
We are very interested in outside the art community. Outside the art community.
Hi, when exactly does the year begin?
Good question. It doesn't, that's a little arbitrary. For us, it starts in April. For this relationship, it starts in April, right? So this is an April to April relationship that starts during the orientation process.
Can you say April what?
25th and 26th, I believe. That information is actually on our website as well.
If you have an idea for a specific place, do you need to have that nailed down before the letter of intent? Do you want to see that those that things are moving forward in a way?
Place or people?
Place.
We want to know, the most important thing is not place for us, it's really people, right? So if you've got a place in mind, like that's cool and everything, but what we really care about is how are you accessing the people in that place? Are you building relationships and going past the idea of like a place into the people part? Are you building relationships? And if not, that's fine. Just what's your plan to do so? And what's your track record?
You said that you accept 12 fellows, and I'm wondering if if you're in a collective of 3 people, if that counts for 3 of the 12, or if that would be 1?
First, we're accepting 7 this year.
7, okay.
Yeah, and the collective would constitute a fellow. Yeah.
There was a word there that you, deliverables.
Yes.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. What's your problem with the word deliverable? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm sorry. No, seriously, do you want to tell me more about what you're focusing on?
So it said if the goals of the project are not achieved within a year, then there be clear about what deliverables. So I was just wondering if you could maybe give some examples of what those might be.
Sure, and this is less about the 1 year related. So I'm going to give you another example. Our first distinguished artist fellow is Mel Chin, right? And Operation Pater is the project that we're working on with him. And it's a project that he's been working on since 2006, right? And we're partnering with MIT and a couple of other foundations to help him over the course of a couple of years, hopefully bring it to a specific, meaningful conclusion, right? So, with Mel, right, his deliverables for the first year are, so we sat down and we thought about what it's going to take to finish this project, and we thought about that together. And so we are talking about, so basically we have a multi-year funding commitment with him, right? So, but he has to meet these criteria for the first year in order for it to keep going, right? Does that help you? Yeah. Because the goals here are real world goals, and one of the things that we tend to do when we fund artists is, just fund an art project and nobody really follows up. But what's interesting about this kind of work is that it's got real, we want to take both sides of the equation very seriously, right? Like when you're an artist and you're saying that you want to work out in a community and do something specific that really makes a difference and impacts people's lives, then we want to make sure that we're measuring that, in a way that's meaningful and useful for you, the artist.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
So also the timeline, your timeline can extend past the relationship with the blade of grass, and it could have already started.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. Yeah, that's important. Good.
But does it have to have already been started?
No.
Okay. and the community that you want to work with.
Can you talk a little bit louder so that everybody in the back can hear you? That's a great question.
So what I'm about to ask? Does it have to have already started?
No. Okay.
And even if you haven't, but do you have to already have a relationship, like other than, I guess it's the same question. Yes, you can have a relationship with the community, but you're not already working on a project.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that Meryl talked about that was really exciting was like all of the advanced work that you do, the research, and that's something that's really helpful in terms of all of this, right? So I think that most artists who are working at a high level of excellence with people get to know the people for a pretty long time first. I think that's kind of and that's something that we're really looking for. And I am saying this as somebody who's done this kind of work and not done that, actually. So I've seen the other side of the coin. Yeah.
Also, do you have to have already done, like you said, you have to have examples of this on your website. So it is not for people who have not done this kind of work before. If you have an idea that you wanted to do for years, but you haven't been able to do it,
right?
It's not for you.
Well, I wouldn't say
Well,
when you're on
okay, well, with the website, not all of us have websites dedicated to ourselves, but you do have your work linked someplace else, right? So you can share those links. And
yeah, she's asking a slightly different
question. I know. I just remembered
okay,
that.
Got that.
I think that if you do have a strong plan and have an idea of what your timeline is, and you've done the research and you have something to propose, I think that
you should do it.
You should do it.
Okay. And also,
you should do it.
you talked about that the process is really important and the engagement with the community, but I think there was something in there about there cannot be a product? Is
Yeah, there could be a product.
There could
It's
be a-
just,
you can switch
we're
that
not.
product.
No. We're not gonna fund the product, right? Like, so if Merle was applying to us with the beautiful, beautiful project about the rebirthing, right? Then we would fund all of the work in the sanitation department, all of that stuff. We wouldn't fund the stuff at the MOCA. Does that clarify? Does that clarify things for people? Okay.
So going back to what is a community for you? In my mind, well, the community, the kind of what I think of as a community that the type of thing I've done before, they're not all local or all in one place. They don't necessarily aren't people who necessarily even know each other, but they have certain things in common.
Okay.
Are you thinking of local? Are you thinking of New York?
That's a good question. So in general, that's one of the reasons why we hold these things. So I'm not going to answer that question specifically because it's so specific to you. But I am going to say that we're here to answer specific questions like that in terms of what, on a one-on-one basis. So I want to just quickly pause and say that we're going to take probably a big handful of questions from folks. And then after that, you're gonna be able to meet all of us. So you know me, I'm Deborah Fisher, I'm the executive director. Mierle Capra is our interim program manager, right? Exactly. Elizabeth Grady, our program director, is on maternity leave. She has a beautiful new baby boy, right? So, yeah, he's so cute. And so Munir is filling Elizabeth's considerably smart shoes. Ellen Stoller is our Director of Development and wonderful resource. And Joelle Tapask is our very, it's her first day today, guys. Yeah. So you'll meet all of these people, but let's ask more questions. So you come talk to Munira or I. Yes, and we will answer this question.
Can you apply with more than one project?
Ooh, good question. Amir, what have you been saying when people, I haven't gotten that one. I would choose a project.
Yeah, I would choose a project.
Yeah, for sure. Who's next?
But maybe if you say, if you're working with the community.
Oh, here, use the mic.
Maybe if you're working with the community and they're a little nervous about this whole thing.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, we could do this, or if it doesn't work, we could do that.
Yeah.
Maybe that would get more participation from them.
Let me speak to that. Yeah, absolutely. So Meryl's right. Okay, so anybody who didn't hear it, you need to be able to be flexible when you're working with people, right? And so one of the ways that we're thinking about that is this process of applying, especially with a 500-word letter, right? That's not very much space. Paint a really solid picture of what you think is going to happen. We accept the idea that what you applied with is going to change when you actually do it. I think that speaks to what you're talking about. Yes, we can't hold you to that because there are too many variables.
There was a kind of an audience room earlier when you mentioned that if you come with a clear idea of your project, we're not going to accept it. Do you guys remember that? Yeah. That was about that. Deborah was referencing the fact that your project's probably going to change.
Right.
Because you're working with human beings.
Right. So can I go back to that really quickly because I agree with you that that's a little drony, but I'm going to clarify it and make it easier. What we're not looking for is artists who believe that they know exactly what's going to happen when they go work with a community of people. Right? Like we are specifically looking for people like Meryl who are saying, no, I'm here to listen, right? And a lot of times when you go in to listen, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So we are looking for a certain amount of not knowing, and that's okay to put. And what I wanted to express is that it's okay to put a certain amount of not knowing in your proposal. Be smart about it, though. Say you don't know about this, and you don't know about it. Be specific, right? Does that help the groaners in the back? Yeah? Okay. Who's got questions?
So I'm curious, if you have members of your team that are not artists,
yeah,
so part of your collective,
awesome. We love that. Well, who's got it? Okay. She's working her way back up, guys. Sorry.
I'll move back up.
Yeah, the front's on fire.
It's a difficult question, but I find it helpful sometimes when applying for things to know what the dates are, the things that funds are dispersed, so that I kind of, know not to submit things where activities are going to happen that are really expensive before the funds come out. And I was wondering if you know what the disbursement dates are for the funds.
The orientation begins on April 25th to 26th.
Yeah.
Right, so it would probably be before then.
Dispersing money?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't know. Well, I don't. Email us. Good question.
We'll find out.
Yeah, this is the first year we're rolling this out. Good question. We'll figure it out. Okay.
That's what I was going to say. That's the question. If a member of your community that your team, your collective team that wants to organize a project is not an American citizen, is that okay? Or the whole collective have to be?
Oh, that's a good question.
When you apply as a collective,
Wait, Munira, speak into the mic. That's
when
a
you
great
apply
question.
as a collective, one of you has to take on the application.
Right.
There needs to be one name on that application, not a bunch of applications. So that one person needs to be
the U.S. citizen.
The U.S. citizen of 25 years of age, not a student.
So part two is if you want to work within the U.S. but also not within the U.S.
Totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah. We just have to pay somebody who has a social security number, right? Like that's the important thing. And then we'll work our way around here, and then we'll do one-on-one.
If I understand correctly, the location of the community you're working with is not necessarily local. It's not necessarily New York community that you're working with.
No.
No, and it could be community that is connected through the borders. You could be inviting people to participate from who knows where.
Sure. Yeah. So just I'm gonna kill a few birds with that question, right? One, this is a national open call, right? So and two, the work can happen anywhere. And three, community is a loose term. So if you have a dispersed community or a diaspora or something like that, or certain kinds of virtual communities, right? That's then talk to Munira or I, right? Sound good? Okay. 2 more questions. 2 more. And one of them is yours. Yeah.
Choosing a community to work with that you, in the case of Merrill, for instance, that you need to get permission from a government agency or from a union or something like that. In your letter of intent, do you need to already have begun to, that process, to have some idea that will actually come through?
That's a great question. It's a wonderful question.
So you've allowed 2 months. That's a process that could take 5 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or a year.
And it's also a process that we can help a lot with.
Right.
Right? So I mean, what we're looking for is, let me zoom out a little bit. Okay. What we're looking for is very feasible projects that we can help you with, right? And that are amazing and that are pushing boundaries, right? And that's kind of a delicate balance. Yeah.
When I did the piece in Los Angeles, the sanitation commissioner from New York, because I thought, who am I to connect to the commissioner of fire in Los Angeles? The commissioner of sanitation in New York wrote letters to his peers,
right?
And saying basically, look, she's not lunatic.
Right.
You know, help her
Right.
out.
And this
And
is
it really,
yeah.
it really opened up a lot of,
So then I have a second question.
Okay, so let me
Yeah.
talk a little bit
Okay.
around what you're asking, right? Because we don't expect anybody to have it all figured out, but we do expect every applicant to have a roadmap, right? And what we're going to be looking at in that 500-word letter is your roadmap, right? And does this sound like a credible roadmap, right? It doesn't necessarily have to all be in place. If there are things that we can help you with, we want to know that because that's interesting to us, right?
And what if you already have the connection, but you don't have the permission? Is it important, like a letter of support? Maybe you have a letter.
Yeah.
I have some letter of support, for instance.
Exactly.
Would that be? Could I?
That's
consider that?
good. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. and I
So
worked
any
really hard.
hardship that you're, yeah, exactly. So if you've got parts of the puzzle,
Right. Can I
right,
share that?
you can share that. You
Okay.
should share that. You
Okay.
have to share that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You must share that.
Okay. Okay.
But you don't have to have all the parts in place in order to apply.
Okay. That's
Because that's something that we could actually help you with.
Okay.
Okay.
Great answer.
Who's got the last question? It's got to be a really good question.
I see.
Yeah, I see it. I think it's a good question.
I can speak loud.
Okay.
If you apply with your letter of intent and then you are asked to submit a full application,
Yeah.
and your project changes drastically in that interim time,
Good
does it have
question.
to be thumbs up or thumbs down?
Great question. I think thumbs up. I mean, you have to tell us a story about why it changed, and that story has to follow, just the general things that I've been saying all along. It has to be credible, right? It has to be feasible. It has to be amazing, and it has to listen, right? These are the important parts, right? So if you can tell a credible, feasible, important story about your listening process that led to these changes, that's the nature of this work. We have to buy that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you automatically get the grant though. Yeah. But it doesn't disqualify you. Does that answer your question? Okay, so I want to point out once more who's here to talk. Everybody's here to say hello to you, and to welcome you to the Blade of Grass family. Mierle knows how to answer your questions. I know how to answer your questions, and Elena will be able to answer, I think, about 3/4 of your questions. Yeah, so come talk to us, get some wine and some cheese, and keep talking to us about your projects and say hello. Thank you very much.